MP ਟੌਮ ਕਮਿਕ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਨੇ ਕੈਲਗਰੀ ਸ਼ੈਫਰਡ ਤੋਂ ਉਹ MP ਨੇ ਤੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਸ਼ੈਡੋ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਨੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਉਹ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਵੱਲੋਂ Mr. Kamek, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Harjit. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for sparing some time. I know it's a question period about to start. And let us start with this. Since you got Shadow Minister for Immigration, what did you find out in Immigration Canada?
So I became the shadow minister in October, and since then I've been going through all the government documents to try and find out why the application backlog is so big. That's the number one issue I hear from coast to coast. People are always telling me that, they're trying to bring in their spouse, whether it's their husband or their wife, or they're having a tough time bringing in a nephew, or they're having a tough time bringing in workers that they have permission to bring in. So the backlog right now, I just checked it before getting on your show, it's 2.1 million applications are still backlogged. And this department has doubled its money. It's doubled its staff since 2016. I looked up the number. They have now 11,925 full-time equivalent staff, according to the briefing I got from the department. So it's the issue that people back home see and have to see. It's not resources they're lacking. It's not that we don't have enough people processing application. It's not that we don't have enough money. It's political leadership, and we have bad political leadership at the top. They've broken the government of Canada. They've broken this department, and that's why it's taking months and years to do things that used to take simply days.
No, we got that resemblance since we have that news that files being sent to retired immigration officers, but still, the ministry is sitting at top and their bureaucrats are there. Is this bureaucrat maze or is part of ministerial staff? They are not taken care. Why is 2.1 million? Obviously, in fact, there is always waiting time since years. But now is 2.1 million is a lot. When they will get these who are in line, their files on the table?
So, like the issue with the codes that the CBC ran that article, I think just a month or two ago. So these are called GCMS codes. And it's unbelievable that you would have files as old as 2006 that are being assigned to people who no longer work at the department. And the minister gave a terrible excuse, which was, well, this is for a management of the workload. Well, I'm sorry, but if a file's been open since 2006 and they're still managing the workload, they just need to give a yes or a no to the person who's made an application for their visa. I think most people at home would be okay if they got a quick no. At least then they can plan their lives around the no. The problem becomes when you're left stranded for a year, 2, 3, 4 years, and you're still waiting, and the government kind of strings you along. And the problem is the political leadership at the top. It's the minister, it's the Liberal government, the decisions they've made over the last 8 years. I mean, they've had 8 years to fix this. When they inherited the immigration system, you didn't have these long wait times. And I have the numbers for you if you'd like, if you want to indulge me here.
Yes.
Study permits in 2015 used to take 31 days to process on average. Today, as of April 2022, so my data is a little bit old. As of April 2022, it took 88 days. That's more than double. Work permits used to take 42 days in 2015. Now they take 62 days on average, so that's up 20 days on average. And temporary resident visas used to take 13 days in 2015. 13 days. That's an incredibly low amount of days to process them. Now they take 72 days on average. And I have people, even in my riding, who log in and they check, and it's over 400 days to process a temporary resident visa, which is completely ridiculous. The system is broken. The Liberals broke the system. The Parliament has poured in resources, poured in more bureaucrats to try and fix it. Nothing has helped because the problem is the Liberals themselves.
How was it before 2015 in Harper era? How was that way? Do you have some statistics about that?
So all my files go back to 2015 because that's when I got elected. So I've been keeping track of it. But in the Harper years, in the Conservative years, there was a backlog at the very beginning that they inherited from the previous Liberal government. And if people think back a little bit to those years, it was Minister Jason Kenney, when he was immigration minister, who cleared the backlog, he actually gave back everybody their application money that they paid when they filed their applications and restarted the system at zero, because the system back then accumulated also millions of backlogged applications. And that's what I don't want to get to. I never want to get to a point where you have to restart the system from zero, because it's unfair to the applicants. Like, the customer service experience people are getting right now from this department is just awful. But it's a government that can't deliver your passport on time, shuts down offices at random all across Canada. You call IRCC, nobody picks up the phone. You send them an email, nobody answers your email. They don't answer my emails either.
Replies.
Yeah, and their applications go on and on and on. And the whole thing is just broken. And it's not broken because we didn't put enough money into it. It's not broken because we don't have enough people working there and we're asking them to do too much. We've doubled their staff, we've doubled their money, and it's the same thing as before. It's just not working.
And 2.1 million application, if we elaborate it more, so they are all domestic, locally applied in nationally, or outside the all high commissioners. That's what the 2.1 million. Did you have some data? How many applications applied are waiting nationally here and outside?
So it's all pooled in together, but it's a mix. About half of the applications are completely over time. Like what the department uses as a metric is called the service standard. So what the service standard is, and this is set by the department. So the same people who are late handing in their applications back to the people saying yes or no. The service standard is basically 80% of the applications are tried to be processed within the service standard. So if they say they want to process them within 20 days, 80% of the applications will be processed within 20 days. But they have a processing inventory. So if you'd like, I can go through some of the numbers going back to September of 2022. That's what I have the latest. So let's use like an example of the provincial nominee program. So that's Economic Express entry class. They had over 20,000 inventoried in the inventory. They processed 61% of them on time, which means 39% of them were not on time. Just another example, the Canadian Experience class, they had almost 7,000 applications. Only half of them were processed on time within the service standard. So about 3,300 of them were late. And when they say late, they mean like it could be really late, like talking about months, years, or it could be just a few days. They don't really explain the details. I'll give you some other ones. Economic non-express entry. So for example, caregivers. They had over 31,000 applications in the system back in September. Only 1/3 were processed on time. 21,000 were still way over time waiting for them. Another one, the Quebec business class. 13,500 applications, 5% of them were processed on time. One that your listeners might be interested in this one is the TR to PR program. So lots of people have come here are international student visas. They went to school, they finished their studies. They're like, you know what, I've worked in Canada, I'm ready to stay here. I'm applying for permanent residency. There's almost 50,000 applications as of last September. Only 13% of them were processed on time. So this is where a lot of people with postgraduate work permits are really upset at the government, because they're right. The government has completely gummed up the system, and now they're waiting to hear back whether they've been accepted. Their work permits are about to expire or have expired, and they're still waiting to hear back from the government whether they'll get it back. Now, there is some good news. On the family class side, most applications are processed on time, but that doesn't mean all of them are. You're talking about maybe 2/3 to 3/4 are within the processing time. But that is, tens of thousands of applications are being processed. Everything else is just backlog, incredibly. And then most applications in the 2.1 million backlog are international student visas, temporary resident visas, and work permits. So those are the three majority ones, because we get hundreds of thousands of applications for people to visit Canada from countries that require visas. We have hundreds of thousands of international students in Canada. I think the last number I had in my head was 680,000, which is an incredible amount of people coming to Canada to study. And then it's people here on work permits, people who are temporary foreign workers, and people here under the International Mobility Program, and that is over 750,000 people now.
How about government is saying they are going to bring other 1.5 million in 23 to 25, which is election year in 2025. So 1.5 million will be there counting from here, or they are going to bring internationally?
So it's a mix.
Okay.
So that number, when they make it public, Parliament requires them to make a report public in November every single year. So they have to table what their projections are into the future. And I have serious questions whether they're actually going to be able to reach that number. So most of those people are already in Canada. Like I mentioned, like the TR to PR program, that's over 50,000 people in a given year. Many of those people already in Canada because they'll come from the provincial nominee program. They'll come from the TR to PR program. Those are people who are already inland. They're already here in Canada. They're just going to have their status changed. Most of these other programs will be a mix of people who are coming in as government-assisted refugees. Then they become permanent residents. So it's a mixed bag. But the majority of those people, it's hard to predict because I'm not the one processing the applications. But the majority of those people already in Canada, they're just going to have their status changed. We already have between 1.2 to 1.4 million temporary residents here of some type of on a temporary status, whether it's as students, whether it's temporary workers, or on a visitor visa. Those people can make applications to become PRs, and then it might be considered and might get granted it. And already, if you look at the provincial nominee program, because that's the best example, almost, I'd say, a fifth of those 500,000 will be people selected by the provinces to stay in Canada because of the skill set that they have. So these are usually the provinces pick people who have skills that we desperately need. So people with construction skills, so bricklayers, carpenters, welders, electricians on construction sites because we're desperate to build homes, build commercial real estate. And there's a huge lack of construction workers in Canada. And so these are the types of people typically that the provinces are selecting. And I don't know about you, Harjit, but my doctor is originally from Nigeria. My family doctor is from Nigeria. She's terrific. And I know many community members in Calgary especially. Most of our doctors were trained overseas, and eventually they come to Canada, move here because they like the lifestyle, they like the cost of living, or they used to like the cost of living. But the quality of life here is really good, and their kids can go to great schools. They have great opportunities. So a lot of provincial nominee programs are also now geared towards healthcare workers.
Tom, another issue I would like to get your intention in about the students. The provincial nominee program, they wanted to apply to get approved through PNP or Express Entry. For that, the draw scores are so much higher in BC, and so many applicants are there. Some of this 20-year, 21, 2-year, they're very young boys and girls. They wanted to move to Yukon now. And so many, ask me, I don't recommend them. It's entirely different living in Yukon. Then they will, why don't I move to Saskatchewan? Where they will end up? And about this, how they will determine this score points on that. When I got here on Express Entry in 97, it was 60 or 65 points, and I applied and got my immigration in 6 months. And I don't know what is going on nowadays about the score points.
So yeah, I mean, I've been seeing online that people are really upset how the scores have gone up because of the suspension of the CEC draws. So there's more people in the pool, so the number goes up for the cutoff. And the CRS score, which we're all rated on, I actually tried it out. I got like a 527 or a 523. And after you turn 40, you start losing numbers, right? And you're right. When you came here in 1987, when I came here in 1985, it was a lot easier to get status, to quickly get permanent residency. But the system wasn't broken like it is today. Like the Liberals have truthfully broken the system by the decision-making that they've done. They have ample resources to make a fix for it. I would also tell people it's not the end of the world if you move to different parts of Canada. Yes. Saskatchewan's beautiful this time of the year. The Yukon, if you love the outdoors, the Yukon's a great place to go. But not everybody needs to stop in the beautiful city that that you live in and your beautiful province, they could always come to Alberta as well. We're always looking for people to work, and Calgary is also a great choice. People can come to my hometown and come to Calgary. So people should want to make that decision to move. I mean, when my parents came to Canada, when my father first came here, he landed in Toronto, eventually moved to Montreal, but he moved to a small town called Sorel, just east of Montreal, to work at a shipyard, and eventually was allowed to sponsor us from communist Poland. So when we came, it was 2 years before we were allowed to come here, and my dad lived in a small town. So sometimes you have to make that sacrifice to be willing to find, like the program that you fit in, and my dad did find it eventually, and that's how we all wound up in Canada. But living in Sorel, it was difficult, especially when I came to Canada. I didn't speak French or English, and it was hard to kind of figure out what was going on. But Canada is a very big country. There are opportunities in every town, in every city, and if there is an opportunity to apply for a PNP program or some different programs in the territories or different provinces, people should take advantage of those opportunities. You never know what you're going to find. Eventually, my family made its way westwards, and we love it. Like my father, my brother, we all live in Calgary now. It's where I'm raising my kids as well. So there's a lot of opportunity out there, and people shouldn't pass it up just because they're not living in the city they would like to live in. It's not ideal, I recognize that, but the system is truthfully broken because the Liberals have brought it to this. They've had 8 years. They've only made it worse every single year. And there's one thing. Some people say, well, it's because of the pandemic that they have the backlog. They had a 1.8 million application backlog before the pandemic. The pandemic did make it worse, that's true, but they haven't fixed it since the pandemic. It's actually higher since then, and all the resources haven't helped.
I will send you a hot news of today in CBC, and you have to personally intervene. It is my humble request to you. It is about Harjit Kaur, a poor girl from Punjab, from very poor family. She's with some physical disabilities, and she applied for student visa, and she ended up with a scammer, a immigration consultant. That consultant put a fake college admission paper to her file. She got student visa, moved here in 2018. When got in Toronto, there's no school. He ended up in Edmonton for new college, where she did 2 years diploma. And now she's working from 4 years. When she applied for her PR in 2020, Immigration Canada found out with you put a fake admission paper. And they wanted to remove her now from Canada. I don't know where the system is from last 4 years. When she was working, she applied, and now they found out from graves of their paperwork, and she misrepresented. So, what would you like to say on this?
Well, I haven't heard about this case.
I will send
it to me so I can take a closer look.
Yeah. It's really tragic. And number two, another story about parents. Obviously, it started with the Harper government when Jason Kenney was overhauling immigration system. The parents were waiting years to get PR to come and live with their kids. Now, then they put a super visa on that. Why don't your parents come here and stay with you and apply for immigration to PR here? But now they're waiting for years and 5 or 6 years, and their files also don't know where it is. Now they put another draw system, lottery system of 10,000. And who knows? Their name is in, who is getting name out of that lottery, then this is also tragic. People are calling in on shows, and when they come home and they look on their parents' side, they are just helpless. They don't want to send their parents to a medical doctor due to insurance issues. So what would you like to do about this super visa parents sitting here?
Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect example of what's happened with the immigration system. People come here on super visas. It's a pretty rigorous process at the front end to make sure that people have the option to come here to visit their family, to stay here for extended periods of time, to be able to take care of their grandkids. I mean, that's the primary reason. We all know that immigrants, all of us do a lot better when our families are reunited. And the super visa program was one of the great, conservative creations when they were in power then. And I have a colleague, Kyle Seaback from Dufferin Caledon, Ontario, who actually passed the private members bill. It's in the Senate being debated in the final stages. That basically makes super visas even better. It gives you more options for having your super visa processed for private health insurance, and just gives people more flexibility in them as well, which I think is a great idea. But again, the system is terribly backlogged. 2.1 million applications. Every time you try to change the status that you have, every time you try to change anything in the system, it's a fight. Everything is slower than it should be. It takes more time. Nobody answers questions. Nobody answers emails. Like, it's pretty much the worst possible government system you could have created, and the Liberals made it worse. 8 years ago, they inherited a system that was perfectly functional, that was responding to people, and 8 years now, you have a massive backlog that's been created. The customer service experience is even worse than it was before, and I understand it's stressing people out. I would be stressed too if I had to deal with IRCC officials on a daily basis, because, people want some type of certainty in their lives, and part of the government services we all pay taxes for is to get that certainty. Like, if there was a yes or a no that came quickly, you could plan your life. But you can't plan if you're being told, I'll answer you in 18 months, maybe, and then you get to 18 months and they're telling you it's delayed for another 18 months. That's no way to treat people. It's not compassionate. There's no dignity in it. And again, the Liberals broke it. They entirely broke the system. It's not the pandemic. They've had 8 years, and we're now 8 years into a Liberal administration of the immigration system, and the wait times are longer than they've ever been before. You get complaints on your show. I get complaints in my constituency office. I guarantee if you ask any member of parliament, what is the number one type of case file they get, they will say it's immigration case files. I have one person, Suki, in my constituency office. All she does all day long is immigration case files, because there's so many of them now.
Well, that's time we have for today. You have to get in on the floor to put some hot questions there. And thank you again for joining us, and looking forward in 2 weeks to call you again and discuss more these cases. And hopefully we will get some solution while you are sitting in across the aisle, and you have to get this government accountable. That's the role of opposition. Best wishes. It's so nice to talking to you, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Harjit.
Best wishes. Bye.